Welcome to Rock and Roll Book Club, where we discuss books by and about musicians and the music business. I'm Dave, and in this episode, my co-host Shelley, Jennifer, and I will be discussing Mud Ride, a messy trip through the grunge explosion by Steve Turner. Steve is best known for being the guitarist in legendary grunge rockers Mudhoney. That band formed in 1988, but in Mud Ride, we learn that both Turner's history and that of grunge itself began many years earlier. Turner's family moved to the Northwest in the 1960s, and Steve lived a comfortable middle-class life. Early in his teens, Steve became obsessed with two things: skateboarding and punk rock. By middle school, Steve was already playing in bands with future members of Pearl Jam. Before forming Mudhoney, Steve Turner had already done stints in bands like the Ducky Boys, Mr. Epp and the Calculations, and Green River. And during his time in Mudhoney, he also played with the Thrown-Ups, the Monkey Wrench, and the Fallouts. In the mid-90s, Steve even had his own record label called Super Electro. Turner has an almost encyclopedia-like knowledge of Northwest music, and with that knowledge, he is able to dispel many of the myths surrounding Seattle and the grunge movement. If you're looking for a deep dive into the origins of grunge, Mud Ride is the book for you, and you'll love this episode. Make sure you're subscribed to the channel and hit the notification bell. Thanks, as always, for watching Rock and Roll Book Club. Welcome to Rock and Roll Book Club. I'm Dave, and I'm here with my co-hosts, Jen and Shelley. Welcome to episode number 22. And this one, we are reading Mud Ride, a messy trip through the grunge explosion by Steve Turner, who is best known as the founding member and guitarist of the band Mudhoney. We've been chatting a little bit before we started the recording, so I think we've all got some thoughts on the book, and we'll just start it right away with a little bit of a history lesson on Steve Turner for those unfamiliar. It's also going to be more of Steve Turner and Mudhoney. Steve Turner is the founding member and guitar player of the band Mudhoney. They started in 1988 and still exist today. The band has released 12 full-length albums. Probably their best-known ones are their debut record, Super Fuzz Big Muff, and the album Every Good Boy Deserves Fudge. But as he talks about in the book a lot, he also had a lot of side projects and different bands that he has played with over the past 40 years. Just to name a few: the Ducky Boys, Mr. Epp and the Calculations, Green River, the Thrown-Ups, the Monkey Wrench, the Fallouts. He started his own record label called Super Electro and released a lot of garage rock music throughout the 90s. So he's had a pretty wild career. Lots of obscure bands, one major band, which is Mudhoney, and that is primarily what he will always probably be known for. I mean, I would expect most people just say Mudhoney and they don't know the rest of the other bands, and that's probably okay.
I love Mudhoney. Now, listen, when I say I love them in the 90s when, all of the grunge whatnot was happening. I've seen them at least once. I think I saw them at the Ranch Bowl, and I can't remember if I saw them again after that because I mostly don't remember any shows that I've ever gone to or books that I've read. So you'd think I'd love those things so much I'd remember, but I don't. But yeah, I love Mudhoney, although I was surprised at how many albums they have. Like, I think I listened to the early stuff and then kind of fell off. And in terms of Steve Turner, to be honest with you, and I feel like this makes me a terrible music fan, but I could have told you Mark Arm was in Mudhoney, but I couldn't tell you the name of any of the other members. So I'm sorry, Steve Turner. Love ya, but yeah. So yeah, big fan. But yeah, that's it.
Okay, Jen.
I've always said this through all 22 of our book clubs. I'm just not that cool. Like. I'm just not. I'm like classic rocker, whatever. But I will say that I knew enough. I knew of them. I knew some of their music. I didn't know many details beyond that. But, I like reading about eras of music that I really never had much of an interest in. because I learned something. And that's the goal of our book club, guys.
Yeah, lots of details in this one.
Exactly, like tons. So I know a lot.
Yeah.
I guess my impression was that I'm a huge Mudhoney fan, like Shelley said. Mine's gone on a little bit longer than just their original era of the 90s. I did kind of follow them into their sort of obscurity, how they kind of died off at the end of the 90s and then kind of came back. And I saw them back in their heyday. I saw them just maybe 2 or 3 years ago when they played at Slowdown. And it was a fantastic show. I mean, amazing. And these were guys pushing 60 at that point, and they were great. I really, really enjoyed it. Probably better than in the early 90s because there wasn't the chaos. You know, when I saw Mudhoney in probably 92 or 93 in that era, everybody was stage diving. It was massive, getting kicked in the head. It's all this craziness. And now everybody's like our age and we just kind of show up for the show and we just kind of, doing this while they're playing, I can say I have probably every Mudhoney record in their catalog. I can't say that about Steve Turner in general, like with all of his side bands and all that. I don't have most of that stuff. I mean, I have a Monkey Wrench album. And because of living in Seattle in the early 90s, I did recognize some of this sort of obscure stuff that he would talk about. Like when he mentioned the guy from Australia from Lubricated Goat, like I remember that guy being in Seattle when I was there in the early 90s. He was dating Kat Bajelen from Babes in Toyland. And I used to see them walking around. So just like weird stuff of like, oh, I remember this. I kind of remember that. But when I got there in 1992, Mudhoney were already part of the elite. Like they were like rock stars in essence. Same with Nirvana and, Pearl Jam. You just didn't really see them hanging out anymore. I mean, that wasn't the scene for them. So.
Did every little detail of grunge in the 90s. But I think I'll get to that later. But to answer the question, yes, it did. I would have liked a little bit more juice and partying, but that wasn't what this book was about.
No.
Yeah, no. What about you, Shelley? Did it change or reinforce your understanding of the grunge movement, explosion, etc.?
I think the most surprising thing to me was that he commented on how by the time the rest of the country was getting into grunge, he felt like it was already kind of over.
Yeah.
And it was like, oh God, like I didn't really think about that, but it does kind of make sense that if you would be living in Seattle and you're part of the genesis of this movement, which I feel like he would hate calling it a movement.
Right.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah. But you'd be like, dude, we've been doing this forever. Like, and now you're just catching on. Like, it's not new. We've been here. So it does make a lot of sense, but it was still surprising to me because the way that it felt as, a teenager in Nebraska was like somebody lit a match and the grunge fire began. It was just like that.
Yeah, I guess for me, it didn't really change my understanding, but definitely reinforced it because I was pretty steeped in this stuff in the late 80s, early 90s. I mean, this was my world at that point. I moved to Seattle because that's where music was happening in the early 90s, and I wanted to be involved in it. And that's why I moved there in 1992. So, but I have to say, in all candor, when I moved there, I already felt like it was a little overblown. Like at that point, like you were viewed strangely if you were an outsider coming in, which I was. I was coming in from Nebraska, or I'd been at college in Wisconsin, and I was going to Seattle. I was one of the people that was following this trend. There was a lot of suspicion of that. And also, it had gotten to a point where the tiny little indie labels like Sub Pop and CZ and whatever were now big labels. And what I wanted to do was to start my own label and discover a band. And I couldn't do that because if I would find a band 5 seconds later, Sub Pop would swoop in and they'd be the newest signing. So you really couldn't, it was suffocating the scene in a big way. And so it did reinforce it. I mean, I understood there were layers upon layers. And before it got to the term, the grunge movement and whatever everyone used to refer to it as in the 90s, yeah, there was all this past stuff that had been going on, and he says like there was a media narrative about grunge. And I think that's what we're all focused on, is that it was these Seattle lumberjack type dudes and whatever. And it was, everything was the same. And there was a certain sound and whatever. And everyone from Seattle was just massively successful. But I think we've all learned that like almost everything Steve Turner did was not successful. All of his other bands, they didn't sell millions of records. Neither did Mudhoney, for that matter. So I think the media narrative that everybody was like Nirvana and it was just this massive, massive success is definitely challenged by this book, because almost everybody named in it didn't have that kind of success, except for the two guys in Pearl Jam that were his friends. And really, when he talks about Nirvana, more in the abstract, because he admits he was never really that friendly with Kurt Cobain to begin with.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Like, what makes me sad about reading these books is that, you know, Steve Turner is talking about how he's touring with Mudhoney, but when he gets home, he's, you know, working in a manufacturing plant, or he's landscaping. And it's not, I'm not saying that those jobs are the sad part. The sad part is that they're not making enough money to live on. And it's these bands that we know and love and revere, and yet they're not getting shit. And it's like, how is that?
Do you think he really felt no jealousy of the fact, or not jealousy, but like a little bit like, hey, those guys Stone and Jeff from Pearl Jam, who I used to play with when I was 15, and I thought they were fucking losers who liked Kiss and Iron Maiden, and now they're multimillionaires with like 6 houses, and I mean, you don't think there's any envy when he's working as a landscaper and stuff in between Mudhoney gigs? I'm just wondering.
I mean, I think he's a pretty honest guy. We know every detail. I don't think he would have hid anything back on this. I mean, when he went to Cobain's house and Courtney's like, take whatever you want, he just took something that, you know what I mean? Like, I think he's a humble guy. I think he's probably grateful. And I, you know, what do you do? Some people have planes. I don't.
I just think it's like human nature a little bit to be like,
I think so
maybe
too,
I could have gone that way. And, you know, I think part of the problem of the 90s in general and the indie world and this kind of stuff is that there was like the Kurt Cobain attitude of hating success or thinking there's something wrong with being successful. And when you get it, you feel guilty about it. And I think Mudhoney kind of preempted that by just saying, well, it'll never happen to us and we don't want it and we're not going to do anything to get it. So when we do ultimately not get it, then we don't feel like, I mean, any certain kind of way. It's like, see, we told you.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that's sort of self-defeating. And it's like a lot of these artists, they really did want to be successful. They just didn't want to act like it. Nirvana, like they said in the book, they actively sought out a major label deal. Kurt Cobain did want to be famous. Maybe he was overwhelming once it happened and he couldn't deal with it. But the desire was there. And the desire was there for Soundgarden. And the desire was there for Alice in Chains. And the desire was there for the guys in Pearl Jam. They didn't want to remain underground for their whole life. So that is kind of a Turner thing. I mean, and that's why I question whether it's real or not. Or did he just sort of accept his fate?
I mean, as you know, I tend to believe what the writers write. Some are probably more truthful than others, but to me, it's this self-fulfilling prophecy. And we've seen that theme in a few of the books. Like, think about the Replacements. Yeah. You know, they were just like, we don't give a shit about literally anything, you know? And so it's like, it seems like the people that cared more got more, you know? And also I will say in the 90s, there was a very, very strong current of not caring is what we're about. Yeah. I mean, not just Steve Turner, not just Mudhoney. That was kind of part of that culture at the time, was like, you know, we don't care about fame. We don't, you know, want to be super rich because we just like fucking doing what we're doing and fuck everybody.
And you were looked down on if it seemed like you were trying too hard.
You were. Yeah. Trying, period, was kind of not cool, which sounds so ridiculous. Looking back, it's like, oh my God, what in the fuck was wrong with everybody? You know?
Yeah, it was a
Right.
weird attitude, and
Ugh.
I, you know, and the anti-success thing, like I don't want to be successful or by the whatever definition, and they didn't want to set their own definition either of like this is what I see as successful, and I will have made it. They're just like, nope, I don't want any of that stuff. But yet they still sought out record labels to put out their stuff so they could get advances. They still, you know, I mean, I don't know. I find the 90s so contradictory. I mean, I bought into all that shit, the anti-success thing, and you know, staying independent and being
Not
anti-major
selling
label.
out.
Yeah, not selling out, being anti-major label. And it's like I see that as so silly now. I mean, I really do. And so many bands' careers were probably damaged because of that attitude or their fear of acting like they care too much.
Right.
You
Yeah.
know, and then well, you're looked at it.
Maybe my self-fulfilling prophecy. Yeah. It's
Yeah.
like you maybe kind of did a little bit of that to yourself because there's no reason Mudhoney shouldn't have been just as popular as Nirvana because at least I can speak to the early stuff. They have hooks. I mean, you think about the song Touch Me, I'm Sick.
Yeah.
That grabs you immediately. That's such a good song. Like they are good.
They're great. The Mudhoney were great. I don't know.
I think honestly, and you guys would know timelines better than me, but I think that the change to that early grunge had to shift so they could fill stadiums. So they could, you know, and whether or not Soundgarden, Nirvana, and who's the other guy we're talking about? Pearl Jam, or even Alice in Chains, STP. Who are a few others like that? Like who is kind of in the more fresher
in
grunge
terms
stuff?
of that at that
Like,
era, I mean, Bush
yeah.
was another
Bush.
one.
I hate Bush, by the way.
Yeah, sort of.
Oh, I don't know what my problem is. I have never liked that band. But my point is this. I think that they had to, I don't want to say make everything a little bit more, you know, hearable. So,
well, yeah, I mean, there's a couple of things.
Play.
It's grunge is a combination of really punk and metal, and that was what Seattle, the scene was all about, was a merging of punk and metal. And the bands that came out like Mudhoney were like, they don't like the metal part. And I would say a Pearl Jam really doesn't like the punk part. They had severed all that part out by the time they became Pearl Jam. They liked it as Green River and in the earlier days. And so that was always the dichotomy. But the bands that ended up winning out that did the best were borderline punk and metal. Nirvana, Soundgarden, Alice in Chains. They were a mix of punk and metal. And they sounded, and so when you had all that 80s metal stuff and then it turned into grunge in the 90s, like I know a lot of 80s metal fans reject that stuff. They feel like they're the anti-Kurt Cobain because it ruined my makeup wearing bullshit or whatever that we used to do. No, it didn't. This is kind of a continuation. This is sort of what I was saying before, like mellower bands or more twee bands really didn't get the benefit of that sort of grunge success of Seattle's success. It was still the heavier bands who could be played on the radio. That radio was already playing heavy rock to begin with. It wasn't as much of a stretch for them to move into Soundgarden or Alice in Chains, whereas it would be more of a stretch to go into, you know, Mudhoney or even Mother Love Bone, Green River.
Yeah. One thing I would like to say about the whole not selling out thing, and that I do admire about the attitude of the 90s or early 90s, is that a big part of it was artistic integrity. Like, we don't want to sign with a major label who's going to tell us how to do our music. We just want to do our music the way we want to do it. And so it wasn't just about posturing, which I think I maybe made it sound like it was. It wasn't. Well, maybe it was for some. I don't know. But
it was a little bit of it.
That is like, we want to do our music and we want to do it the way we want to do it, and not be polished and not be bullied to do things a certain way. And I think that's cool as shit. I'm totally down.
No, I do too. I respect that part of the 90s. I think what hurt it was a lot of potentially great bands that intentionally put a ceiling above them as we can't go any farther than this because then we'll be perceived as sellouts. Like, why wasn't Pavement a much bigger band? I think they self-sabotaged their career by saying we can't go any higher than this. Otherwise, we're a sellout. And a lot of other bands were like that. And a band like the Smashing Pumpkins, who I don't really like that much,
Oof.
they shed that attitude, and they're still here today, and they play arenas, right? So I don't personally like them, but
Horrible.
they sort of were like, they got caught up in all that, and they were shit on a lot at the beginning in the early 90s. Oh, they were on a fake label, a fake indie, and then but they had always been signed to a major label, and it was just all this pretend. But what it turns out was the audience didn't really care that much, and they ended up liking the Smashing Pumpkins. So I mean, you can hurt yourself in a way. And then also I think some bands were a little too eager to sell out. That was the opposite side of the coin. Like, where they were just like, they've been a band for 6 months, and Epic Records walks up and is like, hey, you guys want to sign a deal? And they're like, hell yeah, let's do this. They were nothing. Like, you know, they were too eager to sell out because of the opportunities were presented to them that wouldn't have been presented otherwise. Why did a major label ever offer a contract to the band Steel Pole Bathtub? Right? They just were never going to sell records. It was stupid. And that band taking it was clearly, they're just like, we want money.
Well, Dave, obviously it's because it's such a great band name. I mean,
yeah, right. I mean, I just use them as an example of the most ridiculous major label signing of all time, because that band was never going to sell records ever.
I will say that I was so excited to read this book because of my love for Mudhoney, and because of my interest in grunge, and because of my sincere love of the 90s. But I was pretty disappointed because while it was full of detail and whatnot, as Jen would say, it needed more juice.
It did need a little juice, yeah.
And Dave, as you had said, it reads more like an encyclopedia than it does a compelling narrative. So I think this is another one of the books where if you're really interested in the history, you got it. He's giving it. He's giving you a first
everything
of all the stuff of grunge. But if you're looking for stories of things that happened on the road, if you're looking for, you know, how he developed as a person throughout all of this, if you're looking for drama at all, it ain't there. And so it was, I hate to say it, but a little bit boring.
Well, I would use the term dry. That way I don't say boring, but no, I'm with you. I'm with you for the most part. I mean, like we were saying, I think off air, I am pretty steeped in this Seattle stuff. And so for me, I probably knew about 90% of the names of bands that he threw out. I think the average reader is probably more like about 20 to 30%, because he was digging in this really obscure stuff. 10-minute warning and the farts when Duff McKagan from Guns N' Roses was a Seattle scene guy. Like, you got to be steeped into that stuff. Like,
yeah,
I would have liked some Duff stories. That would have been more juice. But like you said, yeah, like, so it's just like, I guess my summary would be like, like you said, if you want to learn a lot about this, or you already know and you just want to maybe get some more detail, then this is a good book for you. But if you wanted to tell a story of how a young kid from Texas who moved to Washington and who got into music and record collecting and became a grunge icon or whatever, you don't get a lot of that. I mean, it's not told in a storytelling sort of way. It's a lot of like, and then I hooked up with this guy, and this guy played in this band 10 years ago, and we jammed for like 2 weeks, but it didn't really work out. And it's like, okay, but like, you need an overarching thing. Like, get me from point A to point, Green River to Pearl Jam, to Mudhoney, to grunge, to the dying off, to the band reconnect. I mean, you know, that kind of stuff. Along the way, your wife, you got married twice or whatever, and you've got a kid and all this, and you became a family man, and you bought a minivan and all of these other type of things. And that was interesting, but he made that such a tiny, tiny part in between his encyclopedic recitations of like every band and every club that ever played. I still felt it was really dry. Like, give me some stories about when you went on tour with Nirvana, not just people were getting fired. It was unpleasant.
Yeah.
Right. I agree.
We need some juice. Yeah. I mean,
but again, just a second, maybe that was his maybe that's him. Maybe that's how he dealt with things. Like, you got
Maybe
fired.
he's just
Okay.
boring.
I mean, it's not that he's boring. He's just detailed.
Okay. No, and again, I don't like to say Steve Turner's boring. His guitar playing is electrifying. It's fucking awesome. Like those early Mudhoney records, like Super Fuzz, Big Muff, and Every Good Boy Deserves Fudge, Tomorrow Hit Today. Like those are incredible albums that I still listen to today. And I keep up with Mud. I've got a poster of Mudhoney. You can't see it because it's off camera, but right there, like to my left. So I still keep up with this stuff. But yeah, I do have to say, if I'm just being honest, it was a little dry.
Oh, I'll tell you.
Okay.
Sub Pop being broke.
Oh yeah.
So he talks about how they were like kind of in this robbing Peter to pay Paul situation and doing some shady shenanigans to, you know, stay alive. And that I can't remember. I think was it them or Nirvana that like basically paid the Sub Pop bills for a while?
Well, it's a kind of a combination of the two. So, in other words, if Chris Novoselic hadn't been so stupid as to insist that they get a contract with Sub Pop, which he personally insisted, he showed up at Bruce Pavitt's house one day with a contract and made them sign it. If they hadn't, when Nirvana left, Sub Pop never would have received any money from future Nirvana. But because they had the next album after Bleach, they made a lot of money off that. But in the interim, before that happened, Sub Pop was broke and they were writing tons of bad checks. And there's a band called the Best Kissers in the World. I don't know if you've heard of them. They had one record on Sub Pop and the artwork is just canceled NSF checks from Sub Pop that they didn't have any money. They ended up leaving and going to another label. Mudhoney did a record, Every Good Boy Deserves Fudge, which came out after Nevermind, but it made them a lot of money. And that Sub Pop was able to like pay people that they hadn't paid and do like you say, settle up with everybody. Then they got the big money from Nirvana a little bit later after that. But it's inaccurate to say that Nirvana saved Sub Pop. It was really Mudhoney because that Every Good Boy Deserves Fudge record was massive at their scale. And so if it sold a couple 100,000 albums, they're getting $1 million or $2 million of money flushed into their new system. And they were able to get right financially. But yeah, that was a huge thing in the early 90s that what band didn't have an NSF check from Sub Pop because they were just writing bad checks left and right.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like just Sub Pop was so cool and everybody wanted to be on Sub Pop. And it's like, well, how the hell are they so broke? How does that
all in their marketing? It was all in their marketing.
Yeah, they were spending tons of dough and weren't keeping track of how much was coming in.
Yeah. And people, but that's what that was the label. That was where everyone was coming from. Yeah.
But their genius was the marketing because the bands were all great, but there's a million great bands that have never been heard of because they just never got out of their scene. They never got, anywhere in their career. But Sub Pop figured out a way to make the world interested in what this little scene was and made it a much bigger deal than it seemed to the people that were there.
Yeah.
I remember Mark Arm just being amazed that people in England had heard of them and they did a show and there were like tons of people there and stuff. They did that Lame Fest in the UK. That was all a hype off what they did in Seattle, the Seattle Lame Fest, but they did UK Lame Fest. And it was bands that barely had been heard of, but yet the hype about Sub Pop, because they had done such a good job marketing themselves, got people to show up to see this festival of bands they had largely were unfamiliar with in a country, a completely different country. So that was a success, but they spent way too much money doing it. I think that was their problem on that end was, the Pearl Jam situation and the way they still stayed tied in with Mudhoney, and then they were all still friends. And Pearl Jam was nice people. They took the band out. They kept taking them on these big tours and getting bigger paydays for Mudhoney than they had ever gotten before. And, they could have had a lot of judgment about it. Steve Turner, he doesn't have a lot of tact when he talks about bands he doesn't like. He doesn't sugarcoat it. When he talks about Mother Love Bone, he's like, they sucked. Straight up, no middle ground. They sucked. And those are his two of his good friends. So surprise for me was they were all still friends. I mean,
Yeah.
there was so much divisiveness and negativity in that if you're a sellout versus your true indie or true punk or whatever.
I was surprised that Desiree was such a bad mom. I was really surprised. I'm
Was
like,
that his
"Oh,
first wife with the, or his wife with the that had her own kid at first?
yeah, yeah, yeah." I was surprised that she was a bad mom.
That was a weird situation. I
Yeah,
mean, with that, I
for
mean,
sure.
no judgment or anything, but like the kid was there. Then all of a sudden the kid went to live with the dad for a couple of years to go to a special school. And then he kind of came back and then just lived with Steve Turner. And like they were his kids now.
Yeah.
Well,
It was weird.
That was a situation where, while I admire his tact, and that he didn't, trash the mother of his child.
For sure, he'll trash Mother Love Bone, but not the mother of his child.
Yeah. that was an opportunity for juice, because I think our spidey senses were like, wait a second, what the fuck is this lady up to? Like, something seems off, but we're not getting the story.
No, we're not. There were a lot of details that seemed just kind of left out, and he's not a celebrity in the sense of some of these other rock stars that are used to having their personal lives pried into. So maybe he was trying to be a little bit more reserved. But this is your memoir, dude. This is your time to get it out. Like, if you want to make a clear statement, like, this is your time.
Talk about surprising things. I was shocked when he talked about how much he ended up loving James Taylor.
Yeah, I was kind of.
Oh, yeah. Yes, that was not a shock to me. That was something that everybody should be doing.
I will say
far away.
I will say massively. It's still being felt today, whether people acknowledge it or not. We've already talked about the misnomer of the word grunge and how most people at the time didn't really use it. It was kind of a marketing term. I mean, somebody did use it in the mid 80s. I know Steve Turner pointed out that was maybe the first use of grunge, but most of the bands didn't refer to themselves that way. But I think the everlasting impact of those bands can still be felt. Nirvana, Pearl Jam, Soundgarden, Alice in Chains, and even some of the smaller bands and bands that were that never quite hit it as big. Mother Love Bone. They're about to release the 35th anniversary of that one album that they made. Another
But they're
new
the band
version
that
of it.
sucks, right?
Well, no, I think they were great, but Steve Turner said they sucked. But they were the band where the singer died about a month before the album came out. And then they became Pearl Jam after that. Like Eddie Vedder came in and whatever. It was an offshoot of Green River. But I think it's still lasting. And now when I hear a lot of new rock bands, they all sound like the 90s.
Yeah.
Especially more with women artists. I think I'm hearing a lot of people that sound like Liz Phair and Belly and Throwing Muses, that era of the 90s. But I also hear a lot of rock bands that sound like Pearl Jam and Soundgarden and Nirvana. Try. I don't say succeed, but I think the impact is still felt today. And I feel like that movement was a very significant movement. And nobody involved in it would actually refer to it as a movement. Like you said, Shelley, that's kind of a dumb concept, calling it a movement. It wasn't really, but I don't know. I think massive.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes. But everything, every genre, everything we've ever been through, it just builds and builds and keeps going. Whoever thought that country music would be as big as it is today? And then you've got all sorts of crossover. You've got Taylor Swift. You've got the Chicks. I mean, it's just crazy, the inspiration that grunge, or any matter for that fact. Look at where grunge came from, as we talked about. It just all melts.
Take out maybe Heart and Quarter Flash, and Jimi Hendrix, who most people didn't know was from Seattle. Name an artist from Seattle prior to grunge. I mean, like I said, Quarter Flash, Heart, and Jimi Hendrix. Who else was from there? Literally nobody.
I don't know.
Put that entire scene on the map. The growth of Seattle, it's not because of grunge, but I mean, it's a factor. All the extra attention on the city of Seattle, it experienced massive growth at the time. They went from just being some nothing little town up in Northwest Washington that nobody it wasn't on most bands' touring itineraries and stuff. So, anyways, in terms of that, I think it put Seattle on the map. And I think when you have a sound or that is focused on one city, you know, REM was a massive band and Athens had a cool scene, but Athens didn't become the epicenter of music, right? For any period of time at all. Seattle did. So that's why I think it was even bigger than most sort of, you know, popular music movements, or for lack of a better term. It made me long for the old days when you actually had to go buy something, go to the store, and people had this collective thing of like, they could have record release parties and you lined up in front of the store to get the album and you were so eager to hear it. And it's like, now it's just so lame because like everything is just, doop, got the new album. It's like there's no, and that's why people don't care as much about artists anymore. That's why there's no bands anymore on the charts. If you look at the charts, it's all single artists and duos. There's no bands. It's been a negative cultural change. And there's a vinyl revival going on now, as we all know, but and I like it, but I do kind of miss that older era where there was record stores was a place to hang out and meet people, and you know, you went to the club and I don't know, it did make me kind of nostalgic for that pre-digital era.
Okay, I'm gonna take this one.
Okay.
No, because you have stacks and stacks of albums and they get dusty and they're gross and they skip, and like tapes, remember tapes? You take your pencil and you have to rewind. And then if it breaks, you're like, ah. But yeah, I do miss the big reveal, you know what I'm saying? I do miss that. Where like you would, you know, when Taylor Swift's new album came out, my daughter had a bunch of friends over and I think it held their attention for maybe 5 minutes. But I think the way that we have access to music now, I can make like on my Spotify, on my Apple, I can make the dumbest playlist in the world and have access to every song I've ever loved, from the freaking 70s to any movie soundtrack to, you know, lost cuts. I prefer it this way.
What happens when Spotify disappears?
I don't know.
It's rumored to disappear. It'll be gone within a couple of years. You don't have any music then. It's ones and zeros is all you had. Like, I still have the CDs, the records, the whatever. I won't be at much of a loss. And I wonder if the music listening public doesn't think that could ever happen.
I have to say I land maybe in between the two of you on this topic. I really miss, and I know that you can still do this with records and whatever, but I do miss the consumption of a work of art, which is an album. You know, with streaming, it's like you can just like listen to a song here and there and make playlists and whatever. And I don't think you feel the full thrust of what the artists are trying to do with the record. You don't have an A-side and a B-side. You're not like holding on to this thing and like reading the lyrics along. Although I do appreciate that on Spotify, it will show you the lyrics. But it's not the same. At the same time, I remember being a teenager and not having access to albums that I really wanted. There just wasn't a way to get them.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'll say this. We're all dubbing tapes for each other to try to listen to this stuff.
And if you want a couple songs from something, you got to buy the album or wait for the radio to play it and press and record on your tape.
I used to do that. Yeah. I used to record on the radio, songs off the radio back in the day.
Yeah, for sure. But here's the thing with Spotify and even with Apple, you can play a whole album.
Yeah.
That's what you want to do, which is great. You do that all the time.
You to dig into the
liner notes.
Well, I just think I feel like
the music that's not the most easily consumable on first listen. You know, when you're listening to an album, it forces you to dig in and listen to the songs that you aren't attracted to at first, but those then become like the best songs, right? Mm-hmm. And maybe it's just the way that I consume streamed media, but I just don't have that anymore. I forget what bands I like, you know, like listening to everything streaming for years now, it's like, I don't have this, book of CDs or this. I mean, I have vinyl, but I don't have the stack of vinyl that I used to collect to go back and be like, oh shit, I was looking for Mudhoney, but damn, I want to listen to Screaming Trees. Like that's,
Mark Lanigan. Yeah.
I will say the digital music, the only advantage for me is I love having my entire collection on shuffle.
Exactly.
And I can just shuffle everything. But that's not an algorithm. That's my own stuff. Like albums I've downloaded from Apple, digital versions of CDs and records that I've already gotten. And I do love that. I mean, 200,000 songs or whatever I have digitized. I love listening to that. That's the greatest radio station I've ever heard.
I need a minute. I'm going to take a little minute this time. And, just two little things I want to say. One, how many books is it now that have mentioned Courtney Love and how unsavory she is? And I feel like if that is a theme throughout our book club reads, then there's some truth there.
Yeah.
I just want to say that Steve Turner reinforced my feeling that Courtney Love sucks. So yeah, there it is. He was like, she brought this chaotic energy and zaps everyone else's, and we know she likes to punch people. So boo to Courtney Love. Note number 2 is that Steve Turner introduces and closes the audiobook. And I wish he would have read the whole book.
Yes, I thought the same thing. The exact same thing.
I mean, was he too busy landscaping or what? He didn't have time?
I don't know. And it's like, I hope it was his choice and not because they told him he wasn't good enough, because I thought he did a great job on the prelude and the postscript. I liked hearing him. I think it would have been a more interesting listen had he done that, and we would have really felt the feeling. And I kind of compare it to like when you listen to podcasts and the hosts are the ones that do the commercials. I am more likely to listen to those than to the Uber manufactured slick radio type ads that are like, hey, listen to this, and that's how it felt with this book. It's like you have this slick voice reading this book about grunge, which is gritty and supposed to be authentic, and instead we got radio dude reading it.
Oh, I thought it sounded like he was reading like a legal brief. It was just boring.
I didn't hate the guy's voice, but once you already heard Steve Turner at the beginning, either don't have him in there at all and just have this guy as the reader, or have Steve Turner do it, because it just made no sense to have him at the beginning and the end. Because then you're like, well, he sounds fine. Like, why do you need this professional reader? Like, I don't get it. But
no, he sounded fine. I just,
I didn't mind him, but I also just thought it was weird. Like, I understand. Okay, maybe, I don't know, Ione Sky or some other major, Paul Stanley's too busy to do it. But like some of these other guys, how is Steve Turner too busy to just read his book for the recording? I mean, I don't get it. So that must have been a decision from somewhere. Maybe the publisher who was like, yeah, I don't know. Your voice
maybe he's just,
right.
I don't know. Maybe whatever.
I just thought it was, I agree with you that it was
same.
Yeah.
I was talking to Dave before you jumped on, Shell, and we were just talking about like what I like so much about him is that he really never had a problem with drugs or alcohol. And if he did, or if he did indulge, participate, he had it under control. And then I was looking at some other musicians that have never, I mean, there's tons of them, but some really successful ones. For example, Steve Winwood, my wheelhouse, I mean, in the late 60s, dealing with all of the craziness, he was great. Chris Martin of Coldplay. I don't love Coldplay, but they're huge. And he
needs drugs to fucking lighten up. That guy sucks. I'm sorry.
I understand that, but listen, they're a huge band, commercial as they may be. I mean, he's a sober guy. Henry Rollins, I read, never did drugs or alcohol. Do you guys know that?
Yeah.
Paul Stanley never had a problem. Gene Simmons. I mean, I think it's really, I think it's a really a rare find. I mean, they're out there, but he was never in deep trouble.
It's
with it.
refreshing.
Yeah, it's very refreshing. And
especially when there's been some significant deaths from heroin and otherwise from the grunge scene.
Yeah.
There was a lot of it. I mean, he touched on Kurt Cobain, but he didn't really mention Kristen Pfaff from Hole, who died shortly after Kurt Cobain.
Scott Weiland from Stone Temple
Scott Weiland.
A
little bit later, but it still counts. And there was a lot of that. There was Lane Staley, right?
And Mike.
Oh, Mike Starr.
Yeah.
So there was a lot of that in there. And then, of course, there's all the stories that the people... Well, the singer of Mother Love Bone, Andrew Wood, died of a heroin overdose a month before their major label album was coming out. But you know what I was surprised about, if we go back to the biggest surprise, that Mark Arm was into heroin. I never heard that before.
I didn't know that either.
I never knew that. And that he was a problem, and that when they were making certain records, like he would just disappear and stuff. It's like, that's the kind of story you hear about Kurt Cobain and, real junkies and stuff. I never heard that about Mark Arm. They kept that pretty under wraps.
Agreed. I was really surprised at that. And I was like, did I just miss it somehow?
I never knew that about him. They kept that totally under wraps. How many actual artists from other books were mentioned in this book? I caught Nirvana, Mark Lanegan. I'm going blank. They talked about Kiss, how much he hated Kiss. So there's the Paul Stanley book that we talked about. He talked about Screaming Trees. He talked about Nirvana, of course. Pearl Jam. We didn't read a Pearl Jam book. Dave Grohl. We read the Dave Grohl book.
Mm-hmm.
That's all right. That's like 7 or 8 fingers I'm already at. I kind of wasn't counting very accurately, but this book did have a lot of recurring characters from other books that we have read. And the Courtney stuff was interesting. And yeah, she's really obnoxious, but I thought it was interesting that Steve kind of said that he didn't mind her that much. He said she was a relentless self-promoter and he could only take her in limited doses, but he didn't have the hatred or anything. He was kind of like, yeah, she was okay, I guess.
I don't think he really hates anybody.
Yeah, he's just sort of like that with a lot of people.
Kind of
he either really likes you or you're just like, yeah, you're okay.
I mean, he said he didn't want to go over to their house when Courtney was there. So
that's true.
He does not like the woman.
But Mark Lanegan also didn't want to go over there because he thought Courtney was going to be there that one time.
It was fine. I mean, I got through it. I got excited towards the end because it was starting to get a little juicy, and then it ended. It was fine. I think he's an awesome dad. I think he's an awesome human. And again, this is for a big fan. This is for someone who wants to know every detail. And I'll say this myself about Springsteen. You guys all know he's my dude. And I mean, his book, I've thought about picking it before. It's long. It is long. It is like
40-hour listen.
I mean,
I just made that up, but
you're not too far off. But I mean, it's freaking long. How much do we need to know?
Right.
Yeah. No, my overall thoughts were kind of, I think we might have addressed it earlier, or maybe that was before we started recording, but like, I liked all the information. I like Steve Turner. I just, the presentation did come off much more as like an encyclopedia of like listing all of this stuff and not as much anecdotal storytelling and stuff. And I think there's a lot of storytelling that could have been there about wild times on the road with Mudhoney, or when they, the early days of Green River or whatever, or what about that one show where you opened for Nirvana and then 2 years later they're opening for you? Or how come no reference of the fact that Mudhoney wrote a song called Sweet Young Thing Ain't Sweet No More, and then Kurt Cobain stole the line in a Nirvana song. And he says, Daddy's little girl ain't a girl no more. He took that right from Mudhoney.
Oh my God.
How come no reference to that, right? Like, I just think there could have been more juice. There could have been more storytelling. There could have been more anecdotes. I didn't hate the book or anything. I liked it. I like Steve Turner, but like the presentation is, you have to really want to know about Steve Turner's entire discography and like every record he ever listened to, pretty much. Those are my kind of thoughts. It was good, but not great.
Yeah.
I'm with you. I would have loved to have heard more actual storytelling. My instance that I was sad we didn't hear about was the song "Touch Me, I'm Sick." I think people thought at the time that it was about AIDS, but then the rumor was that it was actually about Mark Arm being allergic to cats. And I'm like, give me the cat content. All right. Can we please know if this was true? But I think I agree with you, Jen. Steve Turner seems like a great guy. I really liked him. The only other issue that I'm going to take with the book is that I don't love the title. I get what they were doing. It's called Mud Ride. Mud from Mudhoney. Mudslide. Play on that. But guys, all I can think about are poopy diapers. So I probably would have chosen something else. But Steve Turner, great guy. Glad he's doing okay. And yeah, I send love to him, but not as much love to his book.
Yeah, I think it's interesting how we get to see what it's like after the explosion. Like we see he was a landscaper, he's doing all these other things. I mean, this was after the rush. Like you don't always hear that about rock stars, like what they did afterwards. Like the money dried up, they had to do something. Like they have families, they have to do, work. I mean, so I thought that was interesting, and he wasn't doing it in a kind of I'm embarrassed way. It was like, this is my job. This is what I got to do. I got to make money. I got to, I got kids and I got a family and all this shit. So I thought that was pretty interesting. That was his only really more anecdotal type of stuff. But
yeah. Okay.
Everybody, that wraps up episode 22 on Mud Ride by Steve Turner. Another interesting ride here in our book club. Make sure at this point, because we should do this more at the beginning, but we always wait till the end. Make sure that you're subscribed to the channel. Make sure that you hit the notification bell so you get a notification when a new episode comes out. We do put them out on the first of the month, and I feel like that's pretty easy. But just in case you can't remember first of the month, hit the notification bell. Make sure you're subscribed.
I'm gonna boop it this time.
Yeah, whatever you got to do.
Boop it.
And next month, you'll know when we're going clubbing, which will be on the first.
Yeah,
But if
exactly.
you forget, you'll be reminded.
All right, thanks.
Too, Facebook, Instagram. Check us out.
That is true.
RBC
On social media. All right. Until next month. Adios, everyone.
Bye.